In this video, you will learn how to input a function and then graph it. You will also make use of the delete and insert editing keys to correct any mistakes while inputting the function. Before we begin, let's make sure the plot option is turned off. So to check to see if the plot option is turned off, what we're going to do is we hit the Y equal key right here. So we select that. Now notice here we have plot 1, plot 2, and plot 3. None of them are highlighted, so that means that the plots are turned off. Now if you happen to come in to this screen and you see, let me go up here and move the arrow up and hit enter and then move back down. If you happen to see any one of these that are highlighted like it is for plot 1, you want to turn that off. So if you came into the screen and you saw that, you'd move the arrow up and then you would hit enter to unhighlight it, and then you can move back down. So you can see that all three of these are not highlighted, so the plot mode is turned off. Okay, and that's what you want. The other way that you can check this, okay, is if you hit the second function key, and then that's going to control the stat plot when you hit this button here. Okay, now notice that all of the plots, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so on, they're all turned off. If you happen to see any one of these that are on, then you would simply go in and change it. Now how you do that is you would hit enter, okay, and then you can see here that you have the option of on or off. So let's just turn it on by hitting enter there, and let's go second function and quit to get out of this mode. Okay, so if you go back into the stat plot, second function, stat plot, and you notice that any of these plots are turned on, you would go ahead and select the one that you want to turn off. In this case it's stat 1, so we hit enter. Okay, we're going to move the cursor to off, and then we hit enter. Okay, so we can get out of this mode by second function and quit. Now if we hit second function stat plot, you can see that everything is turned off, and then if we just hit Y equal, we could also see that they're turned off here. So really the easiest way is just hitting Y equal and turning it on and off from this screen. But there are some reasons why you would need to go into stat plot to change other things. So you'd hit second function and stat plot, and then there's some other things you can change in here. Okay, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So let's get out of this screen now. So now that we have the plots are all turned off, we also want to be viewing the functions in the standard window. So let's make sure that we set the viewing window to standard. That means when we graph the functions, we're going to see them in standard mode. So to do that, we go ahead and hit the zoom key. So if we hit zoom, okay, if you notice down here, number 6 says Z standard. Okay, and that's what we want. That means zoom standard. So we can simply hit number 6, the number 6 down here, and that will put us in the standard mode. Or we can use the cursor and move down to the number 6 and then hit enter. So the easiest way is just to hit number 6. Okay, so that puts us in the standard viewing window. Now what that basically is, on the x-axis it's going from -10 to 10, and on the y-axis it's going from -10 to 10. Okay, and each increment is 1. Alright, so let's get out of this screen, second function, and quit. Alright, so the first example that we're going to do is we're going to graph a linear function, which is y equals 2x minus 3. So what we do is we hit the Y equal key. Alright, remember this should look familiar to you. And we're going to input 2x minus 3, so 2. Now the variable key is right here. Now even if you're using other variables such as p, q, r, z, whatever it may be, your only option here is really to use the variable key, which is just going to be an x. So if we hit X here for that key and subtract 3, and then now we have y equals 2x minus 3. We want to graph that. So we simply hit the graph button right here. And you can see it graphs the linear function, the straight line. Okay? Now let's go ahead and graph another function. So in this example, we're going to graph minus 2x squared plus 4. Now I'm purposely going to make a mistake here, or a couple mistakes, okay? So even though I said minus 2x squared plus 4, we're going to put in something different. So at first, let's go ahead and clear this function out of here. So let's just hit the clear button. Okay. So I'm going to put in 2x, remember this key is for the variable, and then squared, and then minus 4. Now what I said was minus 2x squared plus 4. So I made some mistakes here purposely to use the editing keys to fix those mistakes. So the first thing, let's go ahead and change this to a negative 2. So we move the cursor over to 2, and then we hit the second function and then the insert. So we hit that key there, and then we select the negative sign. So now you can see we have negative 2. Now we need to change this minus to a plus. So we simply move the cursor over to the subtraction symbol, and it's being highlighted, and that we just hit plus and it overwrites it. Okay? Now we want to graph this. So we hit the graph key, and that's an inverted parabola. Okay, and we're viewing it in the standard viewing window. So now let's go ahead and input another function. In fact, this is going to be an exponential. So let's go to the y equal, and we want to get rid of this function, so we hit clear. And let's go ahead and graph y equals 2 raised to the x plus 1 power. So that's y equals 2, and then raised, that's the power button, to the x plus 1. So we have to use the left-hand parenthesis and then x plus 1. Okay, so there we have it. Now let's go ahead and hit graph. And there's the graph of the exponential. Okay, so let's graph a natural log function. So let's hit y equal. Again, we're going to clear this. So we hit clear. So let's graph y equals the ln of 3x plus 1. So I'm purposely going to make a mistake here. So I'm going to put down the ln of 3x plus 1, and then I'm going to add 6 to that. So I made the mistake by putting the plus 6, so I realized, oh, I don't want that. So I would just simply go back to the beginning of what I don't want, and then I would select the delete key. So I hit delete once, and hit it again for the second time, and then it clears the mistake that I made. So now I go ahead and hit graph, and there's the graph of our natural log function. Okay. Now the last example here, let's go ahead and graph an absolute value function. So let's hit y equal. We're going to clear that function. So let's go ahead and graph y equals 0.5 times the absolute value of x minus 5. So again, I'm purposely going to make a mistake here. So let's go ahead and get the absolute value, and we use the math button. So we hit that, and then we go over to num for number. So we move the cursor over, and we can see ABS. That represents the absolute value. So we hit enter, and let's put in x minus 5. Now close the parenthesis, and then I realized that I actually wanted 0.5 times the absolute value, so I would need to move to the beginning of this function and then insert, so I go second function and then insert the 0.5, okay? And then I graph this. Alright, so here we have the absolute value function graphed right here. Now, since we're in the standard viewing window, this isn't really a great window here to view this in, because this is really a symmetric graph, and this would be extended out a little bit further. So later on I will show you how to change the viewing window. But for now we're just going to keep it in the standard viewing window. Another reason why you would want to use the editing keys is if you wanted to see what would happen to a graph if you change the specific value. So let's just say we want to change this from 0.5 times the absolute value of x minus 5 to minus 0.5, and let's just see what would happen. So we would go back into the graphing mode by hitting the y equal button, and we want to change this to minus 0.5. So I'd go second function and then insert, and then I'm going to insert that negative value there. Then I hit graph, and you can see that the function was inverted. So it used to look like this, okay? It started out here and it went up, and then now you can see that it's inverted. It was inverted about the x-axis, and that's what the negative value did to the function when we put it in front. So that's another reason why you might want to use some of the editing keys, is to change and see what the function would look like by changing specific values. Okay, so this concludes the basics of graphing functions and using the editing keys.